Oh shit, are you serious? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ironically Serious. It is your host, Taylor Hedden. And if I haven't reminded you in a while, this is the podcast for the unfiltered, raw, real conversations about the hard shit that makes us who we are. I have been hosting this podcast for the last 3 years, and it has truly been one of the most fun, exciting, learning experiences in my career and just as a creator. This podcast has been a place for me to share openly about my experiences, about grief, about motherhood, about the hard stuff, and also bring on guests who talk about these things as well, who have experienced the hard things, who are also experts in the hard things. And I realized I don't do a great job of telling you how you can support the podcast and what you can do if you enjoy this podcast. And I realized after listening to lots of podcasts myself, I'm like, maybe I should just include a little intro and remind you guys that if you vibe with this show, if you get something out of this show, if you like this show, the best way to keep this show going and to show support is to subscribe. You can follow us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify Podcast, share the podcast, and of course, leave a review. The reviews mean so much to me. I produce this podcast on my own. I host, I edit, I produce, I publish, and we obviously don't have ads. We don't monetize this. So every share, every subscribe, every review goes such a long way. And I truly can't explain how much it means to me. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about today's guest. So I have been waiting to publish this episode for what feels like forever. We recorded this episode back in July, and it's just been a process of backlog of amazing guests. And so it's finally here. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers. She is a certified sex therapist, a researcher, author, and honestly, one of the most just powerful voices I've had the pleasure of speaking to when it comes to unpacking shame around sexuality, spirituality, and parenting. Dr. Tina is the author of Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, which is definitely a required reading if you grew up in purity culture or ever felt like your sexuality made you bad, quote unquote. She's also the author of Shameless Parenting, which, as you'll hear, is not just for parents. It's also for anyone who is trying to raise emotionally intelligent, shame-free humans and learn along the way themselves. This conversation is so good, you guys, because I have shared many times on this podcast, and as you'll hear a little bit in this episode, I've experienced my own journey with sexual shame and the conservative church and the journey of getting married really young, saving myself for marriage, and realizing how fucked up it all really was and what I was learning as a teenager and how it affected how I viewed marriage and sexuality and all of the things as I grew into my adulthood. So in this episode, we talk about the emotional and physical effects of sexual shame, how we can start unlearning those messages, and how to raise kids who actually know their bodies, their boundaries, and their worth. We get into abstinence-only education and the power dynamics that have shaped our culture's sex culture and what healing can look like when it comes to intimacy and relationships, especially in adulthood, for those of us who have had a rough upbringing around sex and sexuality. So, whether you're deconstructing your faith like I have for many years, or you're healing your inner child, or you're just trying to figure out how the hell to talk to your kids about sex, all of the above possibly, this episode is so, so good. I do want to go ahead and let you know now, for some reason, the end of the episode cut off. So, about an hour in, we had a little bit of an error, and I wasn't able to finish the conversation with Dr. Sellers, but all of the good stuff is in there. You'll also see in the show notes her book, her viral article that really brought to light a lot of this conversation through her studies in school, and where you can also connect with her. Without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Dr. Tina Sellers to Ironically Serious. Remind me again, where are you located now?
I'm in Sandy, Oregon.
Oregon. Okay. Okay. Because I saw you were in California, but you grew up in.
I grew up in Washington State and then was in
Okay.
California for almost 20 years. And I've been back in the Pacific Northwest for, I don't know, 35, 40 years. I don't know, a while.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Good. All right. Well, welcome, Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers to Ironically Serious.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I am really glad. I will definitely probably get into my story more as we go, but my listeners know I have a whole can of worms with my own experience with religion and sexuality. And I'm really excited to have someone on the show who's studied this and
Yeah.
who's actually seen all of this over decades and like can actually prove some of the science behind it. Cause I can only speak from my own experience, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be a lot of fun and it'll be informative because it's a very important topic.
It is, yes. So for those who don't know about you, you have spent your career helping people untangle shame and sex and intimacy. And I would love for you to start by just telling listeners, how did you get into this work and what drew you
Yeah.
to it?
Yeah, that's always a great question. I was actually teaching. Um, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a medical family therapist, a sex therapist, and taught for almost 30 years an accredited marriage and family therapy program in the Pacific Northwest. And while teaching in that program, I taught their graduate level human sexuality course, which was a required course for licensure as a marriage and family therapist in Washington State. So, one of the tasks I had my students do, to their chagrin, actually, was to write their sexual autobiography, which would be quite something for most people to commit to paper,
Hmm.
right? And I would say to them, of course, they had heard about it before they got to the class because it was one of the last classes that they took in their degree. But I would say, this is not at all to torture you, but you already know by now that you're only as good a therapist as you are clear what your stories are. So that
Mm,
you are clear when you're sitting with somebody where you begin and end and where their stories begin and end. And when
mm,
you live in a country like the United States that does not have comprehensive sex education, that makes sex and sexuality dangerous, there is so much mythology and bad information and lack of information around sexuality and sexual health and power and consent, just all kinds of things
mhm,
that you likely don't have the story in your head as a cohesive narrative. It's probably in like experiences like, oh, I remember getting in trouble for playing doctor when I was 5, or oh, I remember my first kiss, or oh, like
mhm,
these kinds of things that I really need for you to see the arc of your story. And so I'm going to give you like 80 questions. I'm not asking you to answer all of them, but I want you to see that there is an arc to my questions and I want you to write your story. And then in the end, I want you to reflect on that story as to, is this the story you want to pass on? Is this the
mm,
legacy you want? Or are there things that you would like to do different as you are communicating around sexuality and sexual health with people in your lives? So I began reading these in the early 90s. And right around the year 2000, I began to notice a dramatic increase in what I later came to call sexual shame. So it was evidenced by a lot of ignorance about their story, what was common curiosities at many different
mhm,
ages, a lot of self hatred and self condemnation about their story, what they wanted, didn't want, liked, didn't like, didn't do. I mean,
mhm,
thoughts, feelings, and actions all the way through their story. And yet the stories I was reading had not dramatically changed. They were falling in the range of common. And so I'm like, what is happening in culture that I'm missing such that I have these 25 to 35-year-olds that are very reactive and negative self-hatred towards themselves about this very common evolution in the human development, right? And so I began really asking them a lot of questions and trying to understand. It took me actually about 3 years to realize I was hitting the first wave of students that had gotten abstinence-only education in their public schools, which we now know was religious education and 80% medically inaccurate. And some of those students also were involved in community groups or community youth groups or church youth groups,
Hmm.
where an added story of God will not be happy with you. It will ruin your future. It will ruin your chance for having a healthy relationship in the future. And it's dangerous, right? And so they have been getting these messages, and I had kind of missed it, just given my age
Mm.
and the age of my own children. I had just missed what was happening in culture. I mean, I knew about abstinence education, I didn't know about the impact. And what I was seeing was the impact. And it was literally making me cry. Like I would spend
Mm.
days reading these papers, and I was heartbroken that they didn't understand the gift of their sexuality. Many of them had experienced so much trauma because nobody had prepared them, protected them, helped them know what to see in the culture, helped them understand the culture that we lived in, patriarchy, power, how we sold people's bodies, to run our economy, et cetera. They didn't know any of this, and they had really been victims to what we had been doing in culture. And nobody at that point had been writing about it or studying it. And I was like, you know, I had no interest in taking on the church, but I just really believed that people deserved to do connection and pleasure in a way that made their life rich and meaningful.
Yeah. And at this time, for context, you were the school that you were working at whenever you were assigning these autobiographies. Was it a
Yeah.
Christian school, or was there just a predominant amount of students coming from Christian backgrounds?
I would say so. I was teaching in the graduate school.
Hmm.
So the graduate school was more independent than the undergraduate school. The
Hmm.
undergraduate school was a Methodist based
Got it.
school. And so there were many students that came at the undergraduate level that had come from Christian backgrounds, of course, at that particular time in history,
Yeah.
the 80s forward, which the whole United States became much more conservative beginning in the 80s. And we can talk about that later and how that happened. But I also would have some students, not all for sure, but probably somewhere between 40 and 50% that had been influenced by churches in
Mm.
one way or another in their life. But what I was seeing was so much higher than that. And that's where I realized, oh, what we had been doing as a country, we had been actually paying for it with our tax dollars, religious
Hmm.
education in the public schools.
So going even just beyond a private Christian education, it was almost pouring into the public system and just how people culturally were viewing sex and all of
Absolutely.
that in culture. Yes. To give you some context on
Absolutely.
mine, I did not grow up religious, but at about 15, I started going to church. And I'm in Texas, so it is very much Bible Belt here. Even if you don't go to church, it's very conservative. And when I started going to church, it was non-denominational, but our pastor was basically Reformed Baptist, if you will. So you can imagine the context of sex was very much in line with, I'm sure, what many of your students or your research has shown. But for me, I started dating someone at 15, and I was told that if I had sex before marriage, it would be, this huge sin and just wreck my life. And so I ended up saving myself for marriage and marrying that person because I was so terrified we were going to have sex. And then we ended up getting divorced at 21 because I was an 18-year-old getting married because I had no idea. And it was so much influenced by the fear of doing something I shouldn't be doing, which I'm sure is a story many of your studies have come across of people who are just almost reacting to marriage because they want to avoid some kind of sin or shame or guilt, or even just their church community doing something in reaction to that as well.
Right. And we saw, and maybe you even saw some of these reactions that happened. There was, as the whole country became more conservative and we began to spread, the religious right and the moral majority really took over the Republican Party to support what later was shown to be an increase in capitalism, really. We were pushing capitalist agendas with a front of family values and the
Hmm.
religious right, right? We had, most people don't know that the Southern Baptist Church, which was the largest denomination in the United States, was pro Roe v. Wade from 1974 through the passage all the way through 1979, because their rally cry, which they were much less political than they became, was really around segregation in the private Christian schools. Well, that became illegal. You could no longer get federal funding in those schools if you did that. So they had to come up with another issue. And this is
Mm-hmm.
literally documented that a meeting was held and the issue that was decided was the issue of abortion. People who know scripture know it's not in there. And yet we have been touting this for 45 years as a way to control women and to control women's reproductive rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so there's a whole lot that became part of the milieu of the United States, as well as in your evangelical churches that became much more conservative, and um, and there was much more like what you're saying, people getting married early. In fact, when I was talking to young students, because I would interview undergraduates a lot too, just because I was curious, they were telling me about this getting married, ring before spring, all of this kind of thing, right? But then some of the older ones would be like, yeah, we now say there's a trial marriage, because if you're so afraid to have sex that you get married in order that you don't get publicly humiliated by
Mm-hmm.
your church or by your community, that relationship did not allow for you to grow up first before making that kind of decision.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That the divorce rate of somebody who marries before 24 is 70%.
Well,
If you
I'm not
marry
sad.
after the age, sure, if you marry after the age of 30, it drops to 18%. And part of that
Wow.
is because of how much growing up you do in your 20s about who am I? What do I like? What don't I like? How do I want to be treated? How do I want to treat others? All of that growing happens in that third decade. Really, so
Right.
much happens there. And so you make a different choice if you make a choice in your late 20s, early 30s than you do in your late teens, early 20s. It's just human development.
Exactly. Well, and I'm sure as you have studied and also helped couples in the therapy process as well, is that intimacy and sex are, I mean, so crucial in a marriage and a relationship. And if you
Right.
have already a tainted view on that, and then also you've never even been able to in a healthy way explore it, how would you
Right.
even know, if you have sexual intimacy, or how to even do that in a way that's going to benefit you and your part. Like, it's just like you're walking in blind to the most important thing in your marriage, basically.
Right, right. Absolutely. I mean, how we do connection and pleasure is really individual to us.
Hmm.
It's some people like chocolate, some people don't. I mean, it's very
Right.
individual to us. And we need time to explore what it means to us, as well as explore our own body and understand it and what
Hmm.
pleasure is to us. And, are we somebody that likes affection? Are we somebody that's not as much we like affection, or we're not super touchy, or like we've got all kinds of things to figure out. We live in a country that teaches kids all kinds of things, right? We wouldn't think of telling children as they're growing up, driving a car is really, really fun. You can tell as we're driving, it's a lot of fun, but it's also can be dangerous, you know, and therefore I'm not going to teach you anything about it.
Hmm.
But
Right.
when you're 16, I'm going to hand you keys and tell you you're safe to drive on the freeway. We would never do that. And yet there are so many things that have to do with emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, sexual intelligence, that are a part of what we need to be teaching at 2, 4, 6, 8,
Mhm.
10, 12, 14, 16, 18, right? Because there are different questions that emerge based on what is coming up for us developmentally, what we're being exposed to. When do little ones find their genitals?
Mhm.
Somewhere around 11 months old.
Mhm.
And if the people in their life are freaked out about that, they've got so much shame packed inside them that they slap their hands away, they yell, they get a grimace on their face, they go, don't, that's dirty, gross, whatever.
Mhm.
That little one is going to do that hundreds and hundreds of more times until they're 3 or 4 and start to realize that there's a correlation between getting in trouble and their genitals and
Mm.
start going underground. But by then, there is so much pre verbal, bodied shame that something is fundamentally wrong with me because these people I love who sustain my life are always mad at me. And I
Mm.
don't know why, because I'm just doing what my instincts are, my impulses are to do as a little person, right? So this is a deep, and I often say your very first shame is a sexual shame. If you live in the United States, it's deep and it's wide and it's thick.
Mhm.
And so you have that, like you're talking about, that you need to do some healing from, but there's a lot of learning too about your body and relationship and having voice and what do you like and being brave and knowing how to do vulnerability and knowing what power abuses are and how power abuses are in a culture. I mean, just there's a whole lot of learning
So
that
much.
ideally we would be doing at different age appropriate ways at every single year as a child grows up. The second book I wrote, the first one, which is Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy, really tells, it's like your story. It says, this is how America became sex negative. This is
Mhm.
what's underneath it all. This is the role that consumerism has played with it. Sex hasn't always meant to be negative, but we covered up those sex positive ancient ideas that were, many of them are Jewish ideas, some are other from other areas as well, but they're beautiful. They were there all along. We never brought those forward. I talk about how you heal, and then I talk about how you integrate your own sense of spirituality with sexuality if you want to, right?
Mhm.
If that feels important to you. That's the first book. But the second book, Shameless Parenting, Everything You Need to Raise Shame Free, Confident Kids and Heal Your Shame Too, that came about because I had so many people who came to me and said, I know what I don't want to do to my kids or to the kids in my life, but I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I got you. I've been teaching this to physicians and therapists for over 30 years. I'll write you a book like a workbook. It'll be birth to two. It'll say, here's what kids are wanting to do. Here's how they behave and their emotional development is. Here's the top books for them. Here's the top books for you. Here's how to heal your shame if you're feeling yourself go "Ugh," when you imagine
Right.
them doing these things, you know? And would say all you need to be is 2 years ahead of the kids in your life. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just read up
Mm.
to 2 years ahead of them and read that stuff. Start to breathe yourself through it, and you'll do a completely different job. And your kid will be, or the kids in your life will be so grateful to you for just teaching it like you teach anything else, like health and
Right.
wellness and recipes and cooking, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. That's so good. I wanna get into some of that in a second because I have kids of my own, and they're in that pivotal life stage, 10 and 6, where lots of conversations, and my 10-year-old's a girl and my 6-year-old's a boy. Well, he's about to be 6 and she's about to be 11, but there's all the questions because yes, you're like, am I doing
Uh,
this right? And, there's so many things I don't want to do that my parents did or didn't do. So that's a whole topic I want to get into. But before I do, talking about sexual shame, I mean, you mentioned a couple of these ways that they kind of show in our lives, but I would love to hear from your opinion. A lot of my listeners are mostly women. I would say they're in their late 20s to 40s, some a little bit older than 40s, but how might they be experiencing sexual shame and not even realize that that is sexual shame and that there's some work to do there? Like, what are some ways that those show up in our lives?
Beautiful question. Um, we didn't have even an operational definition of sexual shame until 2017. First
Wow.
time we did actual research on what's the difference between sexual shame and shame. So Brene Brown has done beautiful work on shame and its impact on us. And bless her heart, shame is kind of an everyday household word now because of her, really,
Mm,
largely. But sexual shame is another kind of layer that impacts our ability to do bonding. So, our ability to do attachment well. So, I'm going to read for you and for your listeners the definition because it breaks it down and it's stunning how much
mhm,
it affects us. Okay. Sexual shame is a visceral feeling. So, like I was saying before, it's in our bodies, like we feel it in our bodies. It's not just cognitive. And that's because it starts so early. A
mhm,
visceral feeling of humiliation and disgust toward one's own body and identity as a sexual being,
mhm,
and a belief of being abnormal, inferior, and unworthy. This feeling can be internalized, right? It's down inside, can be internalized, but it also manifests in interpersonal relationships. So that's where it begins. It begins between us and our caregivers, right? It
mm,
manifests in interpersonal relationships, having a negative impact on trust, communication, and physical and emotional intimacy. So all the ways we bond through
mhm,
trust, communication, touch, and speech, right? Communication, physical and emotional intimacy, opening our hearts. It affects us in that place. Sexual shame develops across the lifespan, like I was talking about, in interactions with interpersonal relationships. But then one's culture and society overlays its messages, and it creates a subsequent critical self appraisal. So the internal critic on our shoulder gets going and is our tormentor until our last breath, unless we do healing about it.
mm,
There is also a fear and uncertainty related to one's power or right to make decisions, including safety decisions related to sexual encounters, along with an internalized judgment toward one's own sexual desire. And I want to talk about that for a brief second. There's a wonderful book called Girls and Sex by Peggy Ornstein. She also later wrote a book called Boys and Sex. In it, she really looks at what's happening in culture now that's affecting our kids, right? What she found in interviewing about 80 girls, 15 to 22, was that they would describe themselves as competent and confident in every area of their life until they got ready to go out. And then they were putting down 3, 4, and 5 shots of hard liquor because they didn't know if they could keep themselves safe out there because we have such a rape culture, or if they had the right to. So this is how rampant sexual shame is. Her her people that she interviewed, the young women that she interviewed, were not religious by and large. There were very few who demographically described themselves that way, and yet this was across the board. So sexual shame has been something we've been breeding both in our evangelical churches and our churches just by and large across
right.
the board, really, unless they're very, very progressive. Um, but we've been breeding it in our public domain as well, right? And you know, we have been letting men off the hook for abuse since the 4th century, that we know of. I mean, probably even before then. But the fact that this will be my last little piece, but the
No, I
fact
love it.
that we put the onus on women about pregnancy when they don't know exactly when they're fertile, when they have to go see a
Mm,
doctor to get a prescription and it is expensive, you have to have health care, right? You can have sex You can have intercourse on one day and not ovulate for 5 days and still get pregnant. And yet, we could stop unwanted pregnancies today if every
Mm-hmm.
single man who was going to stick his erect penis inside a vagina and ejaculate simply covered it up
Right.
or went and got a reversible vasectomy. That contraception is inexpensive at your grocery store, over the counter, takes no doctor's appointment. We could
Right.
stop it today if we put the onus on men, and we don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been saying, okay, well, then let's let women make a paternity test. And if she decides to keep a child, he's responsible for $100,000 between
Mm-hmm.
the point she delivers and until that child is 18. Period. It is taken right off their income, because men would all of a sudden care at that point,
Right. Right.
right?
Well,
But they don't care because we don't hold them accountable to it, which is no favor, honestly, to them either, I don't think.
yeah, and one of the points that comes up when you're describing all that too is the fact that, the label that many of us have either experienced or, just, I mean, it's in culture everywhere. It's if a woman wants to be sexual, then she's a slut or she's this or, and then other women are pitted against each other for that when men do not have that stigma at all. In fact, it's often
No.
celebrated that men can be, ostentatious and go out and get the girls and the ladies. I mean, we see it in movies, we see it in books and just everywhere, but then it's so shameful. And that was kind of my experience with the church. Is I was, again, growing up not religious. My mom was very
Right.
open about sexuality and all of the things, and so I came from this background of like acceptance, and then fell into a church community that was quite the opposite. But then I felt so guilty for wanting to be sexual, and I felt this like,
Oh,
this is so weird that I feel so very sexual, but then I wanted to kiss all the boys in middle school and run them down, like
sure.
all these things. And then now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I am literally feeling shame about even thinking about this because I'm not married. So it's so cruel that we have that standard. And I don't know how we can, maybe you have some answers of like, how can we kind of shift that? And how can we talk to our daughters and our sons to start fixing that narrative for the next
Yeah.
generation?
Well, really, a lot of it gets fixed, if you will, if we do comprehensive sex education. Like if you follow the Shameless book that I wrote, I mean, even if if you don't have kids in your life, just take yourself through it. Give
Right.
yourself, just age appropriate, the 2-year-old within you, the 4-year-old within you. But when you're doing that, you're talking about lots of things. You're not just
Mm-hmm.
talking about bodies and genitals. You're talking about, what is kindness? When are you
Mm.
kind? Who is kind to you? What do you do if somebody is unkind? You're talking about consent. Who's in charge of your
Mm-hmm.
body? Who's in charge of their body? You're so body autonomy. You're talking about choice and respect. You're talking about power. So, for example, in my family, I have 4 kids, and the oldest was a boy, and the next one down, when they were growing up anyway, was a girl, and she was a few years younger. And I remember my son saying to her one day, because they shared a room, "I'll give you a lollipop if you'll clean my side of the room." And she's like, "Okay," because she thought he walked on water, right? And I pulled him aside and I said, "Honey," I said, "if you were your sister and you had all the smarts that you have now at this age, would you think that was fair?" And he said, "No, I wouldn't." And I said, "Well, I'm going to teach you something. Whenever you can manipulate somebody to get something you want, but it wouldn't feel okay if the shoe was on your foot, that's what we call an abuse of power. Your
Mm.
size and your age gives you power over your sister. And so there are going to be opportunities for you to take advantage of that. But if it does it in a way that would be hurtful to her, that's an abuse of power. And that is never okay in our family. We don't
Mm.
believe that we should treat people that way. We believe we should treat people the way we would want to be treated, right? And so you teach about power. You teach boys about power. You teach them that they might stop feeling fear about 10, but girls begin feeling fear
Right.
about 10. And what's that about in our culture?
Right.
We teach them about media literacy as they get older. Like, I can remember I have two granddaughters who are 7 and 4, and we happen to be watching So You Think You Can Dance because they
Hmm.
like to watch that show. And a commercial came on. And I thought, oh, they're now charging, cable's now charging more if you don't want commercials. Like I'd missed
Right.
that, you know? And so I'm like, okay, we're going to use this as a lesson. And I said, do you know what this is? This is a commercial, and commercials try to sell you something. So we're going to play a game and see if we can figure out what it's trying to sell us,
Mm.
And so we did that, and we got into all kinds of conversations. But media literacy is a really important thing that you're teaching. This is all a part of sex education, or what they call in Scandinavian countries life education.
Right. Because it's
Really?
all intertwined.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when you start doing this kind of thing, you are able to get them at those different ages when they're bringing home stuff from school and they're talking about certain things like, oh, great question. Let's get into that. Let's talk about that. Let's find a book
Hmm.
about that. And then it all gets woven in to their natural learning process.
Mm. That's so good. I'm going to have your books, by the way, in the description. So for anyone listening right now who's wondering where to start, we'll have those links. But what about for the parent, right, who maybe their kids, in elementary school, maybe they're in middle school, maybe they're a teenager and
Sure.
they're listening to this and they know they've missed some of these milestones. What do you say to
Yeah.
them for, feeling like, is it too far gone to start having these conversations? And how do you help parents or tell parents where to start? Like, are we sitting down at the dinner table? Is it as simple as you read this, I read this? Like, where does someone begin if they haven't been having these conversations from the get-go?
Yeah, great question. Well, it's really going to depend on the kid and the age,
Okay.
right? So some kids are real private, and so those conversations are hard for them. They can even be 8 and they can be feeling that, right? And so
Mhm.
you do want to respect what's uncomfortable for them, and then you want to do it quick. Like you want to say, um, like, whatever it is you're wanting to talk about, tackle. You're going to be like, okay, I got something to talk to you about. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm going to try to get it done in less than 60 seconds.
Oh,
But it's
wow.
really important because this little piece of info I want you to have, because it's going to equip you to manage the world out there. And I want you equipped to manage the world. So I might take one thing. Like I might think, okay, 9-year-olds are often getting whistled at for the first time, and it's very scary to them because they don't know what that means. So I might say, okay, I'm going to talk to you about this thing. Sometimes out there in the world, adult men will whistle or yell or do something as if they have a right to you. And it's
Mhm.
going to feel in your gut not so good. You can come talk to me about that at any point. You can run inside. You can tell anybody that you trust. But there are some things in this world that where we allow people to misbehave and scare people and we don't do anything about it. And that's one of them. That's one of the
Mm.
things that's very common, that men are allowed to whistle or say something about a girl's body or about what she looks like. And she didn't give them permission to talk to her. And so because they're so much older, it can feel scary. I just want you
Right.
to know that happens out there and you can come talk to me about it. So one issue, quick,
Got
right?
it.
And I'm gonna do that. There's no such thing as a talk that was never helpful to begin with. It's usually too much too soon, or it's not enough, or it's too late and it's uncomfortable. Really, you've got little itty bitty things you want to be doing kind of along the way. So if you've missed it, say, being a human, I keep learning. And I just
Mm.
learned something that I wish I knew when you were 5, and I didn't know it when you were 5. But I'm learning it now. And I want to talk to you about it, and I want to figure out a way to do it. And some of it's about bodies, some of it's about how we treat people, some of it's about how we run our country, and some of the things that happen that we want to be wise to, you smart to. And so I've got this one book, and it goes through different ages. We could do this a couple of different ways. We could read one quick section together, and then I could go get the books at the library that they recommend, even though they're for way younger than you. and we can both read them on our own time, or we can do it together. What would be most comfortable for you?
Hmm.
Okay. And just say, I know that you're going to be doing this for me, but just in case there's something in here that could be helpful to you, I want you to have that because you deserve it. You deserve to have what's helpful to you. It's okay if you think I'm crazy. It's okay, whatever. I'm just doing the best I can given what I know. Right. And you just own it. You just own that it's uncomfortable. But you
Hmm.
also own that it's important and they're important. Yeah.
That was so good. I feel like I need to put that into a script. The way you said that just made I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I'm totally comfortable. That was so good. I think that's some of the hardest parts about of like what you said is every kid's so different too. And so
Yeah.
respecting and approaching it with, hey, like what is comfortable for you? Like I know for me and my daughter, we have a journal and I bought this off of Amazon and she's getting older. So I remember being a little girl, like sometimes it's embarrassing sitting and talking to your mom about stuff, boys, or, like you don't want to look them in the eyes. So we have a little journal and we write stuff in the journal and we don't talk about it if it's in the journal outside of the journal. So that way it
Uh-huh.
doesn't feel as scary talking about
Right.
things or, if she's feeling sad or had a fight with her friends at school or, as things, get different as she
Right.
grows up, I'm like, that's the safe place for her that she said is okay to talk about these things in that setting. So I love that you mentioned
Beautiful.
like approach the child with them in mind, not just what you want to get
Yeah.
out and what you want to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can remember my son, we would talk driving because we're both looking
Mhm.
forward.
Yep, because you're
Right.
looking forward.
And
Yeah.
again, one issue. And I remember one time he was in high school and he was dating a sweetheart. And I said to him one time we were driving and I said, how do you know she wants to kiss you? And it's not just you who want to kiss her. He goes, huh? And I said, I guess I'm just thinking that sometimes girls will do things that they think other people want, but they might not want to do. And it's not always so easy
Mm.
to read them. And I'm just wondering how you find out that she's really on board for whatever kind of touch you're doing, like a kiss or holding hands. How do you make it safe enough for her to say
Oh.
no? And he goes, gosh, I don't know that I've really thought about that. And I'm like, would you be willing to think about that? Like, say, ask her sometime, do you feel like you could say no? I don't feel like holding hands. I don't feel like kissing you. Do you feel like you could say no? Because I want you to say no because I don't know your yes is a yes unless I know your no is a no. Right. And
Right.
so it's that kind of thing. Again, 25 seconds, begin and end. Right. Yeah.
Mm. That's so good. And that's also, yeah, teaching your son about consent and respect.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. In your book, you talk about the mess model, which was really interesting to me. Can you explain what that is and
Yeah.
how it helps unlearn some of that sexual shame we've been talking about?
Right. So it took me 11 years to write that book. It was a lot of work and a lot of incredible people talking to me about their lives and their stories. And there's a lot of stories in there because I wanted people to find themselves in that book. And I will be doing a second edition in 2027. I've been just asked by a publisher to
Wow.
redo it because it's such a pertinent issue still, right? And
Still,
I think
right.
it's, yeah, very much. But so in that time, I had a clinical practice and I was working with students and working with clients and couples and whatnot. And so I developed a model and I called it Healing the Mess. And MESS stands for Model for Erasing Sexual Shame. And the model has 4 different areas. You don't do it linearly. You do it over and over. It's like unwrapping, a ball of rubber bands or something. Um, so it's frame, name, claim, and aim. Frame is get yourself a frame or a scaffolding of sex education because you likely didn't get it. And you can get
Mm,
it by reading the Shameless book and just walking yourself right through it. But there are lots of other places. I give tons of references at the end of each one of those chapters of other books that you can go to. But get yourself that because what it will help to do is dispel the myths that you
hmm.
may have absorbed that you didn't know you absorbed, right? So so do that. That's frame, the scaffolding or frame of sex education. Name is tell your story.
Hmm.
Find a safe group of people, a really good friend, a therapist, a group of friends to read either books with together or whatever, and tell your story. What was it like to grow up in your home? in your part of the country. Because like what
Mm,
you're saying, Taylor, you grew up in Texas.
hmm.
Texas in the 80s, 90s, whatever it was, right? In a time in history and a place actually has a lot to do with how much of this stuff we
Right.
got, right? Our context really matters. So tell that story. What you're going to find out, 90 to 95% of people in this country right now grew up in homes that were silent or silent and shaming about
Mm,
bodies and sexuality and relationships and all of it. In the midst of a time when we were exploiting people to run our economy, right? And so that's what they were absorbing in the media, but not getting actual information to help equip them to know how to manage that, right?
and the silence
So,
part sounds like it's important because it's that even though if your parents weren't shaming, you just not having the frame
yes,
left you to your own assumptions or friends at school or what you see in the media, which was also probably
what they
wrong.
got. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so so many people just absorbed so many things that were not helpful. So that's name. Claim is claim your body as good. And I often say if you get up in the morning and you're not racked in pain and you get to hug somebody or you get to go do something, you get to go to work, you get to go to the store, you get to listen to, I mean, whatever, it's a good body and it's a good day. And
Mm,
yet, if you run an economy based on making people feel inadequate and not good enough, that's how we run our economy, then you have people who are going to go to their deathbed having never appreciated how amazing having a body is. I say it's the
right.
pen that allows you to write the poetry of your life.
Mm,
Everything I want to do, I do with my body. It's a good body. And I'm almost a full-blooded Swede and I run stocky. We all do in my family, but that's how we are. And that's a good body. I'm grateful for it, right? We have to work really hard to claim that body again as good, right? We have to work really hard. And so as we do these three things, frame, name, and claim, we will find ourselves slowly setting a new legacy for what we believe sexual health, body health, relationship health, emotional health is. And that will be a new legacy. We will aim for a brand new legacy for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, because our knowledge will have increased so much and our confidence
right.
and sort of groundedness in the miracle that we are. No one just like you has ever walked this planet before. Your job is to live as fully into that authenticity as you can, because that's the gift you are to you and to your world, right? It's be all you are, right? And we do the opposite in running our culture. And so people don't know how important that is to try to do that for themselves.
Yeah. I love that your model and your work isn't just obviously the sexual part of it's so important, but it's not just that. It's the full person, it's the full experience, the human
Yeah.
experience with all of it intertwined. Because I think that makes it so much more real. Because it's not just sex; it's how you're going about life with the communication, the
Right.
relationships, and how you feel about yourself. And obviously, sex plays such a big part of that. But I love that your work really approaches the whole person.
Yeah. And I would say that in my work, I have seen, especially the way the heterosexual community thinks about sex, it's very reductionistic.
Mm,
It's very much about men ejaculations and their condition of their heart on. I mean, it's just like it's very much about that. It's very much about her serving him. It's just this weird kind of thing. And yet, really, I don't believe that that's the purpose. If there's a
right.
purpose in sex, and I used to love to ask couples this, like, why? What's the purpose? And they'd look at me like I was out of my mind, and I'd be like, I know it's a crazy question, but to humor me for a minute. And they would stop and they would think and they'd be like, well, I want to feel connected and I
Hmm.
want to have fun. I want it to be fun. I want to have fun and I want there to be pleasure. I'm like, okay, well, what if we defined good sex or even sex as connection and pleasure and we both experience it?
Hmm.
So now I'm just delivered a baby. I don't want intercourse.
Right.
but I do want connection and pleasure. And can we design something together that gives us both connection and pleasure? Or I'm 75 years old and my erections are um, not easily dependable, right?
Right.
But if I've been practicing connection and pleasure, then I
Mhm.
have a whole banquet, a whole recipe book of things I like to do when I'm tired, when I have lots of energy, when my sex drive is high, when it's low.
Yep.
We both, or all of us, have all these ideas. Now it's good sex every single time.
Mhm.
It's just different what we're doing.
Mm.
And it's not obligatory, transactional, boring, killing my desire. I don't show my heart to my person. I mean, all the things that so often is the case in heterosexual relationships, it's not meeting the needs for either one. And
Mm.
I would hear the stories over and over and over again. He'd be like, if he's a high desire partner, he'd be like, but if I don't have sex with her, I'll get nothing. And well, what's it like for you to have sex with her when you can tell she's not really there behind her eyes? Her heart's not
Mhm.
open to you. Because I hate it. I hate it. I just don't know what else to do. And I'd be like,
Right.
okay, can you just trust me to help you? Because I'll help you guys craft something you both want to do every single time you reach for each other in any kind of intimate way. And we're going to call any of it that's good, we're going to call it good sex because that's the purpose. It's to bond you, it's to have
Mhm.
something in life that's fun that you can do together. So I don't know.
Yes. No, that was a good little side tangent, and then we'll wrap the episode kind of up on this last thought that I just had. So, let's say there's a woman listening right now who's maybe kind of in that place, right? Like maybe she's, realizing there's some sexual shame that she's had or needs to do some framing. How would you tell her to approach the conversation with her partner if she's scared of how they might receive that conversation of, hey, I'm not really having pleasure every time, or we've been doing it this way and I want to do something different. Like, how can we go about that conversation in a way that's not going to have our partner feel like we are telling them, hey, sex is bad?
Right. Well, first I would say, how do you feel about you and your body? Because if you're not there yet, I want you to spend some time with you
Yep.
and befriend you, know your own arousal cycle, know what touch you like, what touch you don't like. And then when you're starting to get more comfortable with that, then approach your partner and say, would you be up for doing an exploration with me? This is going to sound really goofy, but what I want to do is I want to take our normal, whatever we commonly do, and I want to just put that on a shelf for 2 weeks. We're not going
Mm,
to do that. But what we're going to do is at least twice a week, we're going to spend an hour learning about what kind of touches we like, learning about just what works for us. And we'll tell each other, like, I really love it when you hold me this way, or I really love it when you bite my ear, or,
mhm.
oh, I'm not as crazy about that as I probably have been given off to you that I am crazy about it. I'm really not.
Mm,
So we're going to build a list of I likes, both of us, and a list of it's not working for me now. It might work for me later, but it's not working for me now. And then from there, we're going to work on adding when we take off the shelf that maybe it's intercourse or whatever. We
right.
take that off the shelf. We're going to add some of these things in because I want to expand our repertoire of fun and
But you're
joy.
doing that in a conversation. You're saying like when you're sitting and kind of putting that list
Yeah,
together, not in the
yeah.
actual moment
Right. But
of
no, you can
whatever
be
you're.
you can be in the moment like okay, so let's have clothes on from the waist down and let's just
Mhm.
explore and see what we like and don't like. Like
Ah,
that's one day. That's one afternoon or whatever,
right, right,
or whatever. And take it in little bite-sized pieces, almost like some people never got a chance to do this in junior high and high school back before they were trying not to whatever go all the way meant to them,
right.
and do slow things. Go back and go slow. Go back and
Hand
go
under the
slow.
shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the other day my husband was like trying to undo my bra and I laughed. I'm like, what in the world? He goes, I just hadn't done it in like, 60 years. I thought I would try it.
He's like,
I
"Can I still do this with one hand, eyes closed?"
Exactly. And I was you're such a goof, right? But I mean, it's being playful again because
Yeah.
and sometimes we need to suspend the thing we've been doing in a rote kind of way and
Mhm.
play around a little bit and then build it back up again. And do that every once in a while. Why not? Heck,
Yeah, I mean, especially I'd imagine, as life goes on, things change, especially as our
yeah,
bodies change and
sure,
menopause and all the things. What we liked before might not be the case anymore, and same for our partners. So I love that
absolutely.
way of making it also an activity, so it doesn't just feel like you're basically dumping on the other person of, "Oh, I don't like this, and here's what I like
Oh,
instead." But it's like, "Hey, let's do it together and figure it out together and just have fun in the process." And if we find out that we, have to switch it up, great. If there's not much to switch up, that's great too. Like at least it's like an exercise to do. I love that.
right. Yeah. One of the things I'll often have couples do is I want you to practice saying no and then not getting offended by it, not taking it personally. Because you got to be
Mm,
able to say no. Like, okay, so let's just touch hands right now. Okay, I'm going to let you touch my hand and I want you to say, "Do you like this?" And sometimes I'm going to say and sometimes I'm going to say yes and sometimes I'm going to say no just for practice. And we're going to both
mm,
go, "Okay, I can hear a no because I really want your yeses. I can hear a no."
right.
And so we practice that because a no is just we're different people and we like different things and we change all the time and but
Yeah,
we have in the world of sexuality, we don't talk. So many people don't talk. And so the idea of a no scares the pee whack and whittly dink out of them. So you got to get over that,
right. Because
you
it feels
know.
like rejection, or you don't wanna say no because you don't want them to be,
Right,
feel offended, or like you don't want that or
right.
whatever it might be, but
Yeah,
then we don't communicate what we do want. So then we're stuck in this, "Oh, I don't
yeah.
know what to say." Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So
That
take
is
something
so
like
good.
hands that aren't highly charged and play around with it, or elbows or shoulders or
Mhm.
ears or whatever, just play around with it until you're comfortable. Like, I can hear a no because I actually really want to hear your yeses because I want that to be my roadmap, you
Yeah,
know?
that's really good.